Hi, it's Dre Griggs with Obsidian Wisdom. Today we discuss 10 things you need to know to navigate the modern retirement landscape. When it comes to retirement, I'll tell you first and foremost, most people don't think it's very important, at least early on. As we get older, we realize, dang, if I don't make some changes, I'm going to be working for the rest of my life. Whether you just feel like you want to make a change or you're not certain how long you'll be able to keep working, whether that has to do with your health or the industry that you're in or the place that you're working, there's so much uncertainty that wouldn't you want to have a retirement plan in place to ensure that you're in the most control of your life? That is the beauty of retirement planning. So, when it comes to the 10 things you need to know, first and foremost, I describe this as a wealthy culture. And that's the overall idea that the most valuable thing that you have is your time. And people are starting to figure that out. Retirement trends shows that most people are interested in retiring their own way. When we say retiring your own way, what we mean is you don't just want a cookie cutter approach. You want to be able to design a retirement plan that fits your exact dream life, whether that is traveling, hanging out with family, sitting on the porch, reading a good book, whatever that dream retirement looks like, you want a plan that accomplishes that specific outcome, which is a beautiful thing. So, number one is your ability to retire your way, where you take advantage of your time and you get to live your dream life. And you often hear me say the two most important parts of living your dream life is what you do with your time. If you are happy, then you spend a lot of time doing things that bring you happiness, things that fulfill your purpose, or things that bring you pleasure. If you are unhappy, then that means you're not spending that much time on your purpose or pleasure. By buying all of your time, that makes retirement the most important thing that you can focus on. When you have your time, you're able to focus on your family, spend more time with them. You don't have to choose between helping someone that you love or even helping a stranger just because you can. And whether you have to fulfill some responsibilities in a career that maybe isn't aligned with your values anymore. I find that retirement is often downplayed by society because if you knew how valuable retirement was, all of us would be spending our money on our retirement. But instead, we spend our money on the things that we are introduced to on TV. And the consumerism, as beautiful as that can be, it often is at the expense of your freedom. And so, for most people, they realize retirement is my way to achieve financial freedom. And we discuss specifically ways that you can achieve financial freedom, not only for yourself, but for your future generations to come. Number two on our list is we're living a lot longer. It's very important when it comes to achieving your retirement goals to realize that for most of us, if we retire even in our 60s, that we'll be living at least another 20, sometimes 30, 40 years. Back in the day, retirement planning was very simple. Most people passed within 5 years of their retirement. So they just didn't have to fulfill a lot of the overall goals that you and I have to really figure out in this modern retirement landscape. And also worth mentioning, we may be living even longer. Every time we think we got the number figured out, there's some advancement in science where all of a sudden we're not only living to 75, 85, 95, but maybe 105, maybe 115. And while it does seem like, come on, Dre, you don't really think that, I think it's possible. For most of us, if you really think, okay, we're going to live another 30, 40, 50, 60 years, is it possible that we can make advancements in science that lets us live even longer than that? And I would say yes, it's very possible. So when it comes to figuring out this modern retirement landscape, we really want to focus on, do I have enough money for my retirement? And not only am I talking about retirement for 5 or 10 years, I'm talking about retirement for sometimes as much as I've worked, where you work for 30, 40 years and maybe you retire for another 30 or 40 years. And it's a beautiful thing when you have a retirement plan in place that allows you to take advantage of that opportunity. Now, that does bring up one of the challenges that we have in retirement planning, and that is how much we have to fund it. There is a shift away from pensions. Most pensions, and for those that don't know, pensions is basically when you work for a company and they say, all right, look, if you work a certain number of years, we have a certain multiplier that we take your average salary over 5 years, sometimes 10 years, sometimes it's just the last 3 years. And based off this multiplier, you're going to get a check for the rest of your life, which is obviously very nice and makes retirement planning much easier when you know that you're going to receive thousands of dollars every single month for the rest of your life. Now, what ended up happening in the government and all of its wisdom, they had this idea where they said, hey, look, some of these companies aren't really funding their retirement plans as well as they should. And so maybe we should step in and require companies to have a certain reserve set aside that lets you know that the pension is covered. What ended up happening is a lot of companies were like, dang, this is tying up so much of my money that I don't even want to offer the pension anymore. And that's sort of what started happening. Company after company was like, you know what, we're going to let go of the pension. If you're in the pension program, we're going to pay you out an equivalent to the certain number of years. We'll give you that cash right now, and then we're going to shut down the pension for all future employees. And you'll see in the current environment that less than 20% of companies actually offer a pension today, which is a really big shift when it comes to retirement because about 50, 60 years ago, it was the opposite. And so retirement planning was a lot easier. You had your pension set aside, you had Social Security set aside, you didn't have as many years to live, and you didn't have to fund it yourself. You didn't have to make sure the money was invested in the right way. You just had to continue working, and you got the gold watch and the pension when you retired. That's no longer the case. Most pensions are going to be tied to government jobs. Whether you want to talk about being a teacher, a public servant, like a police officer, a firefighter, or whether you talk about being in the military, other public service jobs, those are the ones that have the majority of the pensions that are still offered. Now, there are still some private companies that offer pensions, but again, it's just not very common. Less than 20% of companies are offering pensions today. Number four on our list is the rising healthcare cost. Now, when we have our job, we have health insurance, we have a certain amount that we pay each month, and we have a deductible, and we're kind of good. Well, health insurance is pretty expensive when you're not funding it through a group policy. Also, depending on the number of times that you go, whether you have a high deductible plan, it can be very expensive. And for many people, it can be a retirement killer that we don't really consider the healthcare expenses a lot. Mainly the times we think we're going to be able to fund it with Medicare. And you find that it's a lot more difficult than you thought it was to be able to qualify for the Medicare. They have a lot of restrictions set aside. And then even in some of the Medicare, you do have a monthly payment that you'll set aside, like Medicare Part B. And so many people aren't ready for the overall expense of healthcare in retirement. And not only are we talking about just your normal healthcare insurance costs, for many people, you may be talking about long-term care, where 70% of people 65 and older will have at least one long-term care episode. And when you look at the cost of long-term care, whether it's the physical therapy or whether it's a home health aide or being in a nursing home, however that looks, on average is 3 years. And the average cost, I believe it's somewhere around like $40,000 nationwide, which means if you have a $40,000 expense and it's over 3 years, that's $120,000 on average that people have to have accounted for in their retirement plan. And as you can imagine, that is a pretty big expense that a lot of people aren't ready for. Even if you have a great retirement the whole way through, the possibility of needing long-term care increases each year that we're alive, right? We already are at 70% of people that are 65 and older, which is basically people who are retiring. That's 7 out of 10 people will need to have some money set aside for long-term care. So you have to decide whether you're going to fund that yourself or you're going to look into some insurance alternatives. You do need to be considering these expenses. And we haven't even talked about the prescription drugs. Whether you want to invest in Medicare Part D or you want to look at some of the government exchanges or whether you join a social club where they have those group discounts that you're kind of used to when you're used to work and then you have the group discounts at the job. Well, there's many group discounts that you can find in some of these civic organizations where they're able to get that same advantage. However that looks, you do want to be thinking about that because that is a huge expense for many people in retirement that a lot of us aren't ready and prepared for. So when we talk about the retirement landscape, that's definitely something I think a lot of people don't think about, but they definitely need to know. Number five on our list is the Social Security challenges, where the majority of retirees are funding their retirement with Social Security income. And the average Social Security income is about $1,700 a month. That's what it averages. And that amount goes with cost of living adjustments and things like that. But if it comes to $1,700 a month and that's all you have for your retirement, then you're saying, all right, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do all the things that I planned on doing. And we haven't even talked about the fact of whether Social Security is even going to be around over the long term. It's already estimated that around like 2035, that it's either going to run out or they're going to make significant changes. What will those changes be? Will they increase the taxes? Will they increase the age of getting Social Security full benefits? We don't really know what they're going to do, but we do know that something significant has to happen, especially when you talk about the funding of baby boomers as they continue to retire by the thousands every single day. Keep in mind that back in the days, each person in Social Security used to be funded by 8 people currently working. If 8 people working and they pay the taxes for every one person retired, that's a great ratio. But when you look at the current environment, it's every 2 people working funds one person with Social Security. That is not sustainable. And we all know that. But whether we're going to make the changes, I don't know if our politicians really have the appetite for that. And so currently it's projected around 2035 to go out. And with the majority of retirees' main source being Social Security income, that is really something that I really think a lot of people aren't prepared for in the modern retirement era. And by the way, we haven't even talked about the tax structure of Social Security. A lot of people don't even know that their Social Security will be taxed, and it will be. And the number is really low. I think the last time I looked, it was like $26,000 for an individual, maybe like $35,000 for a couple, where you would have like half of your Social Security taxed. And so you want to be prepared for both. either Social Security running out or significantly changing, or your Social Security being taxed because you make more than what the minimum is for it to not be taxed. Number six on our list is just the overall volatility in financial markets. About one in every 10 years, we have a recession, which sucks a lot. And if you are looking at your portfolio and you lose 30 to 60% of your portfolio, which is about the average impact of a recession, that can significantly change how long your money will last you in retirement. So, for many people, because they're self funding, where they don't have pensions being offered through employment and we're living longer, that for many of us, that means we have to have money that lasts 20 to 40 years. And as a result, that means you're probably going to face 2 to 4 recessions over that period of time. And sometimes the recession is man created, and sometimes the recession is unexpected. It's just something that none of us could have controlled. Either way, the impact it has on our investments may mean that we run out of money. Many times you have to have an investment strategy that's considered good in a variety of situations where the economic conditions change and my portfolio still performs very well. And many times that means we have to hedge against future uncertainty, which for many people isn't a very good feeling because while we say it out loud, you're like, yeah, I would love to hedge. I don't want to like lose money and I want to make sure that my money lasts in retirement. But when it comes to the application of it, what that means is you have certain investments that just don't perform well when the economy is going well. And you may feel like, oh my gosh, I'm missing out on all this amazing stuff with the metaverse or the cryptocurrency or the Bitcoin or the cannabis or the housing or the AI, where all these booms are going on. But these are the first places that are going to plummet during a recession because these are the next frontier. These is where we invest in those economic booms and we pull back investments in these new frontiers and we go back to our needs during a recession. So if you have hedged a portfolio, then that ultimately means that you're not only investing in the companies that are going to be going gangbusters during a growth environment, that means you're also investing in companies that only perform well during a time of economic recession. And because you're invested in those companies, they're not performing well during economic growth, which is very hard for us from a mindset perspective where someone is walking around saying, oh my gosh, I just made a ton of money at GameStop. And you're like, oh, well, I didn't invest in GameStop. I have some real estate or some gold or something hedging my investments, or I have things in the bonds where I'm hedging my investment and they're not performing well. But then you have the recession or inflation or something. And you're like, all right, I was ready for this. And you have some of those investments performing better during those economic times where you feel a lot more comfortable. And you really just have to have the discipline to stick to the plan you put in place. Number seven on our list, and we talked a little bit about it earlier, that is the possibility of a changing retirement age. There's a point in time that you were considered fully retired at 62. There's a point in time that went up to 65, then 67, and now it's at 70, where full retirement age keeps going up a little bit. And you want to take that into consideration when it comes to the modern retirement landscape. As companies find it more expensive to fund certain people's retirements, as the government finds it more expensive to fund people's retirements, they're more likely to change what it takes for us to be fully vested. Where maybe you used to be able to work 3 years at a company and they raise it to 5 years, or maybe you used to work 5 years and they raise it to 10 years. They want to keep us working in the system, but they have to make sure it also makes sense for them financially. I mean, and that's just the way most of us make decisions. If everybody is living in retirement now 40 years, a company is probably going to say, you know what, if that's what it takes, then we need to have them working a little bit longer. The same with the government. If they're saying, all right, people are getting Social Security and more people are retired than we have working, where it's really jacking up the numbers. And I mean, not literally more people, but the number is getting smaller, where we have the people who are paying the taxes. That group is becoming a lot closer and a lot smaller than it used to be versus the people that we would consider dependent on the government, where they get the Social Security and they're not really working and paying the same taxes as they used to, but the government still has to fund them. Well, the government has to make some changes for it to stay open. Now, granted, you may say, well, Dre, I don't think they're making any changes. And if I look, they just keep printing money. And you're right, they do keep printing money. And inflation is definitely something that we really need to be looking at. But I really consider inflation part of market volatility. So I think we're overall okay with that. When you find that 60% of people who are retiring have less than $5,000, so generally they're considered like they're retiring broke. If 65% of people are retiring broke, then they may not be retiring at the age that they thought they were, where they may say, I have to keep working and I'm going to keep working. And whether they're able to put the money aside and kind of catch up, or whether they just have the plan where I'm just going to work the rest of my life, both options are very real, where you may be forced by like the government or the company to work a little bit longer, or you may decide yourself, like, I have to work a little bit longer. And whether I don't work in my current job, maybe I have to get a new one, where working is a part of many people's retirement just based on the numbers. And that is definitely something that people are dealing with as they're living longer. And they're also trying to figure out, how do I fund everything? In fact, there are some people that will take off maybe like 5, 10 years, where they just travel, they kind of do their thing with the intention of working. The intention was always to go back to work. They knew that they didn't have the money to be able to retire for 20, 40 years, but many people are now saying, maybe I can have a great 10 years. And by that time, I would have been bored anyways. And because I've been bored anyways, it doesn't really bother me to go back to work. And that's where a lot of people are trying to figure out in this new modern retirement landscape, where maybe I can have a great 10 years. I won't be able to retire the whole time like I originally thought, but maybe I could take a small break, or maybe I could take like a sabbatical where I take off like 3 years, but then I come back to the company. Some people have where their paid days are kind of set up where they could take a year off and they still have a job set aside. It really just depends on the company and the overall situation that they're going through. But it's definitely something that many people are trying to figure out, what is the right age for me to retire? Because the number is changing, whether we're changing it or the system is changing it. Number eight is all about lifestyle, where many people want to travel, they want to have hobbies, they want to go to these amazing places, they want to do things with their family. Whatever that is, most people are looking for a lot of flexibility in their retirement, where they can do these one-off things where a friend is like, hey, I'm going to Alaska. You want to go with me? And like, yeah, drop everything and they can go. Or they join a group and the group is like, yeah, we take a trip every year. And this year we're taking a trip to, I don't know, like Egypt. And you're like, would you like to go? And you're like, of course I'd love to go. I always wanted to go. I just didn't have anyone to go with. Where you want to have that flexibility, or whether your kids are calling you up and they're like, hey, I need some help. We're trying to figure this out. Or this amazing investment opportunity comes up and you're like, I got the money. I'd love to invest in it. We really just want some flexibility, where when things change and opportunities arise, we want to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. And you find that more common in this current modern retirement landscape, where I feel younger. I feel like I can do a lot of stuff and I don't feel like I just want to lay around the house. So a lot of people are very excited about this retirement lifestyle, and they need to figure out exactly how much money I need to afford my lifestyle. And you really want to get very specific on the numbers. Look to see how much the trips cost. Don't just say, I'll just have a ton of money so I don't have to worry about it. I can appreciate that as someone who likes financial peace of mind too, but it may be more reasonable and more affordable and not take as long if you have the exact number. Look it up. Does the trip normally cost $1,000, $2,000, $10,000? And then let's put a plan together to achieve that goal versus saying, I just want to have so much money that I don't even have to think about paying for anything. And that's great. But for many people, if you know what the number is and you can achieve it, where you'll be like, hey, Dre, I'm thinking I want to take one trip a year. And then you tell me where you want to go, and I'll look up the numbers and I'll be like, hey, this trip is about $2,000. We account for inflation, where we'll say it goes up by 3% every year. And then how many times you want to take this trip? And then we can mathematically calculate how much money you have to be able to do that trip, which I think for most people is all we're looking for. Just a little peace of mind and certainty around the lifestyle that we want, a little bit of flexibility for things that we didn't prepare for, to where we can make adjustments where we're not being pigeonholed into one particular retirement lifestyle, but that we can adjust it as things change. We make friends and those friends travel. We want to travel with them. Our kids have kids and maybe we want to do things with those grandkids, where we really can't foresee exactly what our entire retirement will look like. And so by having the flexibility as things change, you can change with them. And number nine on our list is a greater individual responsibility. We've talked about how pensions have been decreasing, and as a result, your investments have been increasing. You invested in your 401ks, your 403bs, you're investing in your IRAs and your Roth IRAs. You have to put your money in all of these different investments, and they have different tax structures where favorable here, not favorable there. They have penalties that you have to figure out, where there's just such a greater responsibility on you to put all of this together. Not to mention that you may say, all right, well, I don't want to have all my money not taxed in retirement. So maybe that means I have to invest in some after tax assets where I can have just capital gains taxes, which is a much lower tax rate than my regular income. This is all things that you have to figure out when it comes to your retirement plan. The burden is on us. We need to figure out how much money we have, how much money our investments will give us in a return, and how much they have to grow over the years. We have to see how much we need to contribute on a monthly basis to be able to hit our goals. And will it impact our taxes in a positive or negative way? It's so many moving pieces that I often describe retirement planning like putting together a 5,000 piece puzzle. As someone who loves putting puzzles together, there is an approach that I think works for me, where I usually do the borders first, I have the picture on the side, and then I go through usually the most colorful pieces first because they really pop out. And then you have those background pieces where everything looks kind of the same. It's a little fuzzy. And then I try my best to put those pieces in where I'm matching the shapes and doing like different spots where there's just a small difference in the color hue here, where putting a puzzle together is very tedious and stressful for some, but I love it. I enjoy that. And it's the same for you. For you to create the perfect retirement plan for you and your needs, it really is going to be adjusting. You want to be very flexible to where these pieces are going to be ebbing and flowing as your overall desires change. And we talked about that flexibility, but it's on you how we're going to be able to put the money together. Where should we invest it? How should we keep track of it? What do my taxes look like? How many years do I have to put these investments aside and how long it will last me? It's a much greater responsibility on you and your ability to be able to achieve your retirement goals. Now, granted, you're always able to look into hiring someone, working with someone, and that brings us into our 10th and final trend, which is the impact of technology. Technology works a couple ways. One is you may be able to work remote and travel the world and kind of have that laptop life where you sit on the beach and do your work. I don't know if you can. You may get sand on the keyboards and may overheat it, but we like the idea, right? The visual is I'm not tied to a desk. I don't have to drive a rush hour to get to work. I can log in from wherever I want to be. And for some people, you may be able to move somewhere if you got reliable internet has a significantly lower cost of living than living in like the United States or maybe some of these places. And then when you get your salary that's based on that cost of living, you can live like a sultan. And you may not have to do it very long. And it may not be something that really impacts your retirement, where it gives you sort of the fix of being like, I get to use my talents, I get to have some fun still. And it's a nice mix of everything. And also you have the technological advancements when it comes to retirement planning overall. There's a lot of great information out there where you can put this information, whether you're talking about like robo-advisors, where some people just have a system that kind of sets it up for them, or whether you're talking about some of these financial planning softwares, like the ones that I use, that it gives you a lot of the information that you need. Think of it almost like TurboTax, right? Where for many people, there is a real tangible benefit to having a CPA prepare and look over your taxes. But for some people with a very simple structure, it may be something that they could just have a TurboTax program spit out the numbers for them. And then they're able to file it and they're okay. It really depends on our overall situation. But for someone who maybe feels like they couldn't afford an advisor, they feel like they don't have enough money to work with an advisor, where they could at least get started on their own, where they can see what their net worth is, how much they need to invest. You can put these numbers in a retirement calculator and you can get that information back. That is a beautiful change to our overall system where you can get real feedback, where you can put in based on the returns that I have this year, what can I expect my money to look like in 10 years or 20 years when I retire? And then it can give you that output. Or you can say, what would it look like if I invested this much? And it says how much you'd have in retirement. And you don't really have to have the guessing work. Now at Obsidian Wisdom, we have a program that we call the Wisdomites, and you're able to put your information in there, you're able to get the output and see exactly where you're at. It even gives you the percentage probability of successfully retiring at the age that you set aside. Now, if you're interested in free access to that, you just go to obsidianwisdom.com, and then you'll see the little button that you can click, and you can have access to that free account, and you can figure out whether you're building your retirement on a solid foundation. If you found value in this video, I simply ask that you like and subscribe so you can continue receiving valuable insights on how to solve generational wealth through strategic retirement planning. Until next time, stay safe and enjoy life.